Welcome to Hope and Healing for Mental Health here on 100 Huntley Street, a very special week of programming. And what an amazing program we have for you today. We're diving into mental health all this week, and you're going to leave so encouraged and equipped in this area. Now, joining me again today is Daniel Whitehead, CEO of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's just a joy to be here.
We love having you every time you've been on the show. This is your first time hosting with us, but we're trying to make it easy for you. And, you know, one of the topics you and I are going to dive into today, which I think is so timely, is what is impacting Canadians' mental health these days? Well, the news media. It's huge. And the stories that we read every day in this digital age, every global, local event is right there at the touch of the fingertips. And, you know, Mental Health Research Canada found that 42% of us are saying we've had increased anxiety in the past month. Now, a third of that say tensions with the U.S. and our relationship there is part of why that's increasing, which we read about on the news.
Yeah. Of course, half of us attribute that anxiety to the rising cost of living, but the rest attributed it to global events and personal challenges. So our mental health is impacted by so many different things, but the news and social media can play a big role.
Yeah, they have for me as well. Sociology Associate Professor Marissa Young from McMaster University says the news cycle today often makes bad news feel relentless. And then that contributes to our chronic stress, where people feel like we're always bracing for the next crisis, like what's going to happen next in the world. And I really see that as well. During the COVID pandemic, I had to slow down my news consumption. I had to learn, because I was like, what's happening? You know, how is this spreading? Like, I wanted to know everything as a journalist, but I realized it wasn't having a good impact on my mental health, and I needed to stop that and then fill my tank with lots of scripture, prayer, time with God, worship music, things like that. And I found that actually really kind of recentered me again, got me out of the panic and freaking out mode that news can do to you.
That's really amazing that you took the initiative to do that and to take agency. It's so easy in our culture to not do that, to just keep going. And experts say that this constant negative bombardment can make us feel powerless, which is why it has such an impact on our mental health. But we do have some tips for you today to help moderate that impact. Tip 1 is to set boundaries around how and when you consume news, which is exactly what you did, Cheryl.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, when you feel like it's getting too much, just switch gears, get off the phone, get off the headlines. Do something that's going to build back into hope for your life. And I think it's important to recognize when it's okay to take a step back. Just because something's happening in the world doesn't mean we have to just absorb every detail in real time. We are not running the world, so it doesn't really actually matter. So take a break, whether it's just for a day or even an evening. That can help reset your perspective and allow you to engage with the news in a way that feels less draining. I do this all the time.
Yeah, so important. Just reminding ourselves that God is in charge, not us. Yeah. So tip 3 is to shift from passive consumption to active engagement. Instead of just absorbing negative stories, find small ways to take action, whether that's volunteering, donating, or even just having conversations about issues that matter. That can help restore a sense of agency.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. So I have to do this all the time in my humanitarian work with Crossroads Cares, because I'm in situations that are so traumatic around the world that I see what people are struggling through. I have compassion. It really affects me. But what helps me process that is, you know, doing something to make a difference. Like, so when we fundraise, when we go back, when we feed people, when we get them clean water, for me, that's actually really helping reset my mind away from the trauma and into hope.
Very, very good. I love that. You know, one other thing that we can all do is to ground ourselves in activities that are separate from digital spaces. Things like going for a walk or exercising or reading a book or engaging in hobbies. That can help counterbalance the mental overload that comes with constant news exposure.
Oh, good advice. And lastly, social connection is also a key buffer against stress. Talking with family, friends, community groups about how you're feeling can help put things in perspective and remind you that you're not facing the world's problems alone, that we're all in this together.
Amen to that. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Cheryl, because that is the heart of your conversation today with psychiatrist, author, and podcast host, Dr. Curt Thompson. His speciality is in interpersonal neurobiology. Yesterday, we saw part 1 of your conversation, and here's part 2.
You actually say it's easier for us to give love, to love others, than it is to really receive it. What is the barrier that makes it so hard for us to receive the love that can transform us and then transform others?
You know, it's such a great question. we are people who pay a lot of attention in the world. Even when we are not aware that we're doing this, we are paying attention to what frightens us. And we love until love shows up at our doorstep. Because then love makes demands on me. Like, I didn't think that love demanded anything of me. Oh, of course it does. It demands that I love my neighbor. It demands that I allow myself to seek forgiveness and to forgive. It invites me to reveal the parts of me that are not yet healed so that love can heal it. But I'm afraid because that requires intimacy. That requires my giving you access to parts of me that intimacy in the past has been the source of my wounding. And so as much as I love the idea of love, it is also the thing that frightens me more than anything else in the world, which is why even though we look around and we see we're not very good at loving other people, we would say that we have difficulty with that primarily because we first have an even greater difficulty in allowing ourselves to be loved because of the same fear that Adam had when God comes walking in the cool of the afternoon. Adam's telling a story that God is coming to kill him. God's telling a very different story. But Adam would not let God tell a different story. Adam's already throwing his wife under the bus. And so as to continue to tell the story that he was telling before God came walking. And this is what we are doing all the time. And so we can show up wanting to love others, only to find that it's really difficult for them to let us do that, and vice versa for ourselves.
Yeah. So, when we think something's happening in the room, we're telling ourselves a story about it, whatever we think is going on. But we may not be right. So how do you start shifting the story you're telling yourself? Because that really is a big part of the problem, isn't it?
Right. Well, this is where we say there are a number of different things that we learn about storytelling and human beings. And one of those important realities about storytelling is that we never tell stories by ourselves. I am always, as an adult, I perhaps am the first author in the paper that I'm writing, but I am never a solo author. There are always going to be others who are collaborating with me when I tell my story. So an important question is, who are the people who are helping you tell the story of your life in the way that is most true to the gospel? Who are the people who are helping us do this? This is an important question. So when we ask, well, how can I make sure that I'm telling the story truly? We would say, oh, I don't do that. We do that. And so I'm going to need people in my life who are willing to ask me questions and to whom I am willing to be open, to whom I'm willing to be vulnerable. People who I put in the position of naming things for me that I don't see about myself. That practice of being deeply known in that way not only reveals to me who I am, it also enables me to practice what it's like to become comfortable with that very process, and also to see the value of it. I learned, oh my goodness, like I become more of who I'm supposed to be because I allow someone else to have access to my life. And it is in that regard that I learn more of what is true, not just about what I'm doing now, but learn more what is true about the previous life that I've been living. What was it really like when I was in my first 2 decades of life, in my 30s and 40s and so forth. And so for us, as believers, we would say also to live as God has caused us to live in his image. Let us make mankind in our image. We are relationally image-bearing creatures. That means that in order for me to know who I am and therefore be able to be curious about who other people are, I only ever learn how to do that in the context of connected community.
And I think some people listening might be thinking, that sounds good. I mean, it sounds kind of scary. It sounds hard. How do I find those people I can trust? And how do I find my community?
Right. It's really difficult. I mean, there's no easy way about this. And we would say, God knows exactly what it's like for us to have to do this. You may, well, I don't know, what do you mean about this? The author Paul Borgman wrote so beautifully in Genesis, the story we haven't heard. He asks this question: how many people did God have to ask before in Abraham he finally found someone who said, yes, I will go with you to Canaan? We don't know because there's no story told about that. But it's completely plausible to consider that God had to ask a number of people, and finally someone said, I would go. We know that when we get to the Gospels, Jesus asks a number of people to follow him who say, no, I got to go bury my dad. I got to go check out the plot of land that I just bought, all the things. There are people who say no to him. Jesus also might have come to earth and been asking God, like, well, where am I supposed to find these people? And what we read is, we read a person who is going to just start to ask people, recognizing that they may say no. And if this person says no, then I'm going to ask the next person, and I'm going to ask the next person. And so for our listeners, we might say, first of all, this is not easy to do. Evil does not want us to do this. God knows that this is hard to do. And God could not be more excited that you're even considering doing it, because the moment that you say, okay, I'm going to pick one person, and I'm going to ask them, will you be willing to share your story with me if I share my story with you? And if you're looking for some guidelines, I've written a couple of books where people can get this. But if we want to do this, and if someone says yes, then we ask a third person, and then we ask a fourth person. But the point being that the very act of taking these steps forward is one of the ways in which we are bearing God's image. For indeed, this is the way that God came into the world. He came into the world telling a story. This is what the Bible is. It is a story that is being told. And look at God. Like, he took a risk on us, and look what we did with his project. And he has not given up on that project of continuing to seek us out and to say to us, will you please partner with me? Will you please listen to me tell you my story while you tell me yours, so that we can co-labor with you doing those works that I've made for you from before the foundation of the world?
I think the whole story from beginning to end is a pursuit of intimacy. God with us, and then us with others. You really talk about Jesus looking at the worst parts of ourselves and loving us and not turning away. Can you just unpack that a little bit? I'm just thinking of people watching who have a hard time believing that.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the examples I give is, it's well known for many of our listeners, if we're familiar with the Gospels. There's a story about a woman who has a bleeding problem. Common in 3 of the Gospels. In Mark's version of this, she comes, she has a plan. She knows what her problem is. Many of us, we come to Jesus and I can tell you what my problem is. And she knows what her problem is, her bleeding. And she has a plan for commando healing. We're going to get in, get the job done, get out. Nobody's going to know, right? All very quiet. And then we remember what happens. She knew in her body that the bleeding had stopped. The text reads in Mark's Gospel that she knew that she was healed. She had a sense. Or did she? Because all at once, Jesus says, stop. Who touched me? And you can imagine in her mind, she's imagining like this is not the way this was supposed to go down. And he's not moving anywhere. He's not going to go until someone admits to this. And we come to find out, as he waits, she finally, and the text reads, and she came to him and threw herself at his feet, and with fear and trembling, and told him everything about her. Now, this is what I think happens to us. Jesus encounters us, we encounter him, and we are joyful at the encounter. And yet there are things about us that we don't know that we don't know. There were things about this woman that were beyond her bleeding. Her bleeding means she does not have a marriage, she does not have children, she does not have a family, she does not have a community, all of which were categorically condemning social realities for her. She could be healed of her bleeding and still not have a community or a husband or a child or any of that. Because what is she going to do? Say, no, I'm clean. Really? No, seriously, I am. Believe me. Not until publicly he invites her to take this huge risk of vulnerability and say, this is my story in front of all of these people, because he is unwilling for there to be any stone of shame left unturned, much of which within our own lives we don't know that we don't know. But he does. And those by whom we are going to be deeply known, if we give them access, they can ask questions as well that introduce us to parts of ourselves that we've been keeping in the dark. But when they come into the light, healing is realized, and that then becomes energy I no longer have to burn to contain this, and this is energy that is now available to create beauty and goodness in the world with God in the way that he wants me to.
That's such a beautiful perspective. I think for somebody who is like, their hearts are hungry, I think, when they listen to what you're saying, that they want to create that beauty. They want to have that intimacy. They want to be known, and they want to know others. What are some steps they could take today? How do they even start when they realize they're in this state of isolation, I think, in a sense, and independence, like our culture lives in?
Right. Well, there are a couple of things that we can do. And again, they're not necessarily easy. As we like to say, life is actually very simple and extraordinarily difficult. But it's not difficult because it's complicated. It's difficult because we have constructed narratives in my mind to keep me away from myself, to keep me from having access to the parts of me that I hate the most, that I'm afraid of and worried about. And so one of the things that we say to folks that's very easy, but when I say simple, people can begin to write things. We can actually write our story. This is one of the things that we have people do from the very beginning. Have any of our listeners ever considered beginning to write a journal? And there's a simple way to do this. Just take the first 10 years of your life and say, I want you to write for 30 minutes. Begin with your earliest memory. I just want you to begin to write. Well, what am I supposed to write? And is it going to be the important things that I'm supposed to write? Say, actually, the very act of writing itself is an act of trust that you're giving to the Spirit to say, I want you to reveal more of me to me. I'm going to write about it. Then you take another 30 minutes a week later and you write about your second decade and so forth and so on. Then comes the next risk. I want you to ask someone if they will listen to you read your journal. And you're like, no. I am not doing that. But do we want to be known? We don't have to be known, and you can continue to believe that your life is really complicated. To which we will say, okay, you don't have to. And you can remain where you are until you're no longer wanting to live in that space. And so, writing in a journal, asking one person if they would be willing, if you would be willing, together would be willing to have you read this to them, and perhaps ask them to do the same thing. But also be prayerful about this. And that's one thing that I would say is that these kinds of these exercises are invitations to commune with the Father. We don't believe that we're just doing this by ourselves in our isolated state. We believe that the Holy Spirit is active and engaged and wanting us to tell our story more truly. In the same way that she came and with fear and trembling threw herself at his feet and told him everything about her in order for her to be fully liberated. And so those are two things that our listeners can try.
That is amazing. I could talk to you for another hour. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. I just love what Dr. Thompson had to say, and what a beautiful unpacking of the story of the woman with the issue of blood. You know, you were talking about the barriers that social shame can make for us. You know, if she was just physically healed, she still wouldn't have been able to have a relationship with her community because she was still considered unclean.
Yeah. That's right. I love how in that public demonstration of her physical curing, Jesus healed her so she could go and pursue relationships, go into the religious system, be seen, loved, be touched. And it makes me think, what are the barriers that we put in place that prevent people from being seen and loved in the mental health space?
Yeah, I mean, just even beyond the mental health space, I think just how judgy and critical we can be without even recognizing that we ourselves are broken as well, right? You can't throw a stone at somebody without thinking that you are above them in some way or better than them, and that there's no biblical precedent for pride. There's literally none. But anyway, let's dive into these pillars, because we promised to unpack the 5 pillars that Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries talks about. The second one is more along the same lines, that we talk about mental health as a journey, not a cure. not like a destination or a moment that you arrive at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes if your experience of the church is anything like mine and my upbringing in it, sometimes we conflate healing and curing. We really, and I actually think they're quite distinct. I think healing always happens in relationship, and relationship takes time. It's a process. So I think healing as a journey, recovery as a journey is a really helpful analogy because it's non-linear. It's a place where you learn things, where you discover things. It doesn't go in a straight path. It may weave around. So I just think the idea of a process of learning recovery, learning how to recover is really helpful because it means you can have seasons that aren't easy. You don't have to go, everything was bad, now it's good. You can go, actually, I'm on a journey. I have ups and downs and undulating landscape to navigate. But I think that is a journey that all of us should commit our lives to, is to recovering well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that yesterday on the show, which I loved. It's kind of like, as Christians, we like the black and white. I was sick and now I'm well. I was struggling and now I'm not. And life is definitely a journey, as if you've lived long enough, everybody experiences. Now you say that this happens through 5 key processes. So let's start with the first one, cultivating hope. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think hope is one thing that, again, Christians really, hope is our thing, right? We have hope. We know how the story ends. We know that Jesus wins. And so I think for us to hold on to that ultimate hope, and for people in the midst of crisis or languishing to find those little glimmers of hope, a kind word, a conversation, even a smile, like a positive facial expression from someone who's bearing witness to what you're going through, can actually be a glimmer of hope. And everyone needs that.
It's funny too, because studies show that even if you smile when you're struggling, it makes you feel better, which you don't even have to mean it. Like your body just responds. Okay, so the second one is establishing positive identity. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's so easy for people in the midst of maybe a mental health crisis to receive an identity they didn't ask for. People can be known by a diagnosis, for instance, and we'll get into that when we talk about stigma, but I think that can be a really tough place to move out of that identity. And so to establish your own sense of identity, to say, I am not a diagnosis, I am a beloved child of God, I am worthy of love, that's a really important part of recovering well.
And that self-talk, it really matters. We talked about with Dr. Thompson, the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really makes a huge difference in how we even function in the world. So it's huge. Okay, so the next one is take responsibility. So what impact does that have?
Yeah, I think for many people in crisis, if you think they may go see a doctor or a psychologist, and they're constantly in these power differentials. They're with people who are telling them this is wrong with you or this is a problem, and there's nothing bad with that. The challenge is if you're always in that environment, you can feel like you're down here and everyone is here, like a pastor tells you what verse you need to read. So I think for you to establish your own identity, to have your own sense of agency, to really understand that you are an equal, that they are human beings too, is again a really important part of recovery.
Yeah, that's so good, because I think what I see in culture a lot is a victim mentality, because we're a culture of offense. We're always offended. So that puts us in a victim role all the time, where we're being victimized by everyone's opinion. And I think that isn't helpful in life, just in general, and then it isn't helpful in recovery either. Okay, so pursuing education, which I think we're actually doing this whole week.
Yeah.
How do we pursue education on the mental health continuum?
Yeah, well, it's great that Sanctuary has made resources to help you do that. That's one of the reasons we exist, is to create educational resources. But I think you've got to go out and kind of educate yourself. Like, what is going on in the biology? That's why we love Curt Thompson. What is actually happening? So we can read books, we can do courses, we can sit in small groups, Bible studies. I think it's really important we learn some things and we don't just draw from hearsay or assumptions, which I don't think are helpful. We've learned a lot in the last 20 years about the human brain, and I think there's much for us to learn.
Yeah, and that learning continues. And I'm a personal believer in lifelong learning, because I think it gets very easy to just kind of stop somewhere along the way and go, I've learned enough. It's learning is tiring, and stretching my boundaries is hard. And we live in an information age where it's like there's so much information coming at us. But I think targeted learning can really help us grow, even as we are, like in 10 years, we're going to learn more things about the human brain.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is quite remarkable the things they're discovering about the human brain even now. I would say we've probably learnt more in the last 20 years than in the rest of human history about the organ of the brain, this fearfully, wonderfully made part of the human body.
And we did talk about how so much of what we're learning, as you heard with Dr. Thompson and so many, kind of backing up what the Bible said thousands of years ago before they had the science to back it up.
Yeah, I just love that about the Bible, that these things that often we read in the abstract, which is not to say it's wrong, but also it's backed up just in practicalities. You know, the renewing of the mind speaks to neuroplasticity, our ability to change the pathways in our brain. Paul's been writing about this for a very long time.
I just love it. I could spend all day talking about this. Okay, but we got to move on. So the last process is building community. And, you know, Dr. Thompson unpacked that pretty well, but it's not so easy to do in our digital age and, you know, our independent society.
Yeah, and building community can feel really vulnerable for people who maybe been burnt in the past, and probably all of us have a story of being burnt. But as Dr. Thompson said, you know, leading with vulnerability, I think the one thing we can draw from as we pursue community, as we live vulnerably, is to remember our Lord. I mean, Jesus lived a vulnerable life. I don't think there's ever been a more vulnerable death than hanging naked on a cross, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? So we have a friend in Jesus who models what it is to be a vulnerable leader, and it's his act of vulnerability that has changed the universe. So I think as painful as it can be, to find a safe place, to find a sanctuary where you can talk about your story is really important.
Yeah, it is challenging. And finding the people you can trust, I think, is really important as well. Well, I just want to remind you about our prayer lines, because that is a resource that is always available. Maybe you are in a place in your life where you feel like there's nobody around you that you can trust. Well, you can call our prayer lines. You don't even have to give your name. You can be completely anonymous, and we would love to pray with you. That number is 1-866-273-4444. Send us an email at prayer@crossroads.ca. You can go to crossroads.ca, chat with our digital pastor. We just want you to know that there's literally no reason to be alone. We also have another resource for you. It's a Bible study centered around faith and mental health. Now, you can download it at crossroads.ca/study guides, absolutely free. It's accompanied by insightful video segments from mental health experts that's going to give you daily encouragement as you work through the study. Speaking of education, this is a great way to invest in it. And, you know, before we go, Daniel, you know, I know that no matter what we're going through today, there is another season ahead. Can you just give people a little word of hope about that? That just because we're in one place now, that doesn't mean that's where we're going to end up or be forever.
Absolutely. I think when I read the scriptures, I see stories of people who are struggling, but who know and find the goodness of God in the midst of that. We are part of that story, as Curt said. We're part of that story of hope. Those same people looking to God, finding hope in the midst of whatever we face.
Yeah, such a good word. Well, we also want to remind you that we are talking about mental health all this week, and we want you to make sure to join us tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're extending the program to 1 hour. It's a special 100 Huntley Street, because we have Lara sat down with best-selling author and co-founder of Saddleback Church, Kay Warren, as she shared how she held on to faith and hope during the crushing loss of her son. Okay, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Daniel, for being here. We're looking forward to having you all week, and we're looking forward to seeing you all week. Stay with us.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a supporter-funded nonprofit organization and member of the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. Thanks to faithful people like you, we are able to continue producing 100 Huntley Street. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R4M2, or visit crossroads.ca to learn more about our programs.
What if your favorite hymns held stories you've never heard? In The Origin of Hymns, It Is Well With My Soul, pastor and author Robert J. Morgan takes you into the powerful, untold moments behind the world's most beloved hymns.
For generations, these timeless hymns have lifted hearts and voices. That's why I'm excited to partner with 100 Huntley Street and Crossroads this month to thank you for your continued support of this life-giving ministry. When you understand the story behind a hymn, it changes how you sing it. It becomes personal, a whole new kind of worship. These songs didn't come from comfort. They were born out of real life, out of grief, struggle, and a deep, unshakable faith in God.
With a gift of $50 or more, or when you become a new monthly partner, request your copy. Call 1-800-265-3100 or visit crossroads.ca/hymns.